It is a great time to be a gamer. Baldur's Gate 3 has showed everyone, especially the AAA industry, that you can successfully make a single-player game with zero transactions. I played early access on and off throughout the 3 years that it was in it. Baldur's Gate 3 actually started in development back in late 2016 though, so the game was in the oven for about 7 years before coming out, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's something that other developers need to look at Larian when they're doing their own projects, mainly AAA companies, to see that, hey, if you want to do something really great, if you want to do something really big and over the top, it's not that you can't do it, it's that you need to be willing to take your time. You need to be willing to slow down, to really care about the project, and to really care about the people behind the project. So you don't have to keep pushing games out every year. You're making great profits anyway. Why not take it down a couple notches and actually try to really concentrate on making a great product that doesn't need to be laden with microtransactions and doesn't need to cause people to want to commit suicide. Early access was a really special experience, getting to be a part of that community that would help Larian figure out the best path forward. And Larian is really good about listening to community feedback. So it was actually worth it to be involved in that. Not just for the experience of the game, but because you knew that your data was actually helpful and was being used. And even though it had bugs and glitches, you kind of expected that. And I was happy to kind of wave those aside and be like, okay, so the tentacles are having a freaking fit over there, but it's still a really interesting game. There's still a lot going for it. And even now, in the full release, there are still some glitches there. And I'm still not surprised because it was just such an absolute massive undertaking that I don't think it's really fair to expect that the game was going to come out without any issues. And I think it's going to take Larian some time to catch up with all that because, again, it was just such a massive undertaking. So I'm kind of giving them a bit of a break on that. Would I have liked it to come out pristine? Of course, we'd like that to happen with every single game. But compared to the absolute trash that comes out a lot these days where games are like unplayable, I'd say Larian's doing pretty good. So when early access was in full swing, I was really looking forward to all the community updates and the patches, the panels from hell. Those were always a lot of fun. And of course, waiting with bated breath for the ultimate announcement of when's the release date. And then Larian really kind of blew everybody's minds when they announced that the PC version was coming out early, and we're like, what? Because that never happens. Games don't come out early. They always come out late. So that was just kind of like, pew. So not surprisingly, it's fantastic. We kind of knew that going into early access, that the full version was going to be fantastic. Did we know to what degree? Maybe not. And I don't think Larian realized it either. I don't think they knew that they had basically produced a Magnum Opus. And I think that happens to a lot of people in the artistic fields, right? Is they don't typically know when they have just produced a masterpiece. And usually it's the people around them, the fans, the audience, that brings to their attention, no, you didn't just produce something great. You produced what is probably going to be the greatest creation of your lifetime. And those are heavy words, right? I guess in a way I don't envy Larian, because the realization that you just produced what is probably going to be the best game that you can ever produce, it's got like kind of a duality to it. I think of it from the perspective of a writer, that when you produce something that's just like fantastic, on the one hand, you're like feeling really proud of yourself for this, but then there's like this sinking feeling at the same time where you're like, wow, I can't do this again. I can't replicate this. I can make other great stuff, but I can't make this. You can only produce one Magnum Opus, and once it's out there, that's it. You've produced it. And it reminds me of one of my favorite authors, Gail Carson Levine. And I would consider Ella Enchanted her magnum opus. And it's not that she hasn't produced other good books. She has. I really liked her Two Princesses of Bamar, Fairest Ever. There are other really good books she's done, but none of them have even come close. She can't do that anymore, and that's no fault of hers. She's still a great writer, but she cannot reproduce that. And I think that's going to happen to Larian too. I think they're going to produce other really great games, but it's not going to be another Baldur's Gate 3. And I think that's something that us fans need to keep in mind. It's like, we should be absolutely ecstatic that Baldur's Gate 3 came out, that it's shattering ceilings, that it's bringing some really needed attention into the gaming industry about how important it is to deliver games that are a full package for your fan base, that having single player adventures, having games with no microtransactions, that these are all good, healthy things for the consumers. Very important. But let's not raise our expectations so high that we think that, okay, now that Larian's done Baldur's Gate 3, that's all they can do from now on. Everything has to be at the Baldur's Gate 3 level. And if something is a step below, then it's all of a sudden not a good game. We shouldn't do that. That's way too much pressure to put on Larian. And that's way too much pressure, honestly, to put on other studios as well. Do I think that studios should strive to come out with Baldur's Gate 3-like material? Absolutely. If they've got the funding and the team size for it, yes, AAA studios should look to Larian for inspiration on what they should be doing. Absolutely. Indie devs, you can look to them for inspiration, but you need to be a little more reasonable with yourself. I'm actually an indie dev myself, and believe me, I am not shooting for Baldur's Gate 3 with any of my releases anytime soon. But I am still inspired by Larian and what they've been able to do and how much they care about their projects and their people. And I think that's what studios need to take from them. Really, is not, we have to create something to this magnitude. We have to create our own magnum opus, but rather we should strive to do great things, to treat our people well, and to treat our fan base well. So the game is fantastic in so many different ways. And I mean, granted, it's got, kind of a blueprint already because it's based on Dungeons and Dragons. So it's not like they started from scratch. However, that being said, they have brand new characters in it. All their freaking NPCs are voice acted, which is just absolutely insane, but they did it and it's crazy. There is a new story there. There isn't an existing story, to the best of my knowledge, within the D&D universe about, this specific hero with these other specific people getting tadpoles and having to figure out how to get them out. And I don't think I've ever heard of the Absolute in there. Again, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a D&D expert or anything, but I don't think this specific story exists in D&D lore. And I know that the characters don't. Astarion and Gale and Karlak, these are not D&D specific characters. These are new creations to fit into the world of D&D, into these pre-established places. So yeah, they had the blueprint, but they had a lot of work to do on top of that blueprint. And I mean, you could make that argument for almost anything nowadays, right? Like any writer who wants to write like an epic fantasy, they've got lots of blueprints out there to start with. You could go down the road of J.R. Tolkien, down the road of R.A. Salvatore. There's so many directions you could go in with epic fantasy because it's been done a million times before, and so has sci-fi, and so has romance, and so has comedy, etc., etc. You get the point. Larian having the D&D blueprint does not in any way take away from the validity of the talent of that team. It doesn't matter that they had a blueprint. What they did with that blueprint is what matters. And they did some amazing things with it. What did they not achieve with this game? I can't really think of anything, to be honest with you. And I know I'm probably starting to sound like a million other YouTubers at this point. I'm just kind of singing praises, but I don't think it can be done enough. I don't think that us, as consumers, can say this enough because it's just so important to get that message across, that this is the way you do things. Not necessarily to this magnitude, right? It doesn't have to be another Baldur's Gate 3 like I was saying before, but this is how you do things for your consumers. You take more time on your project to give it the love and attention it deserves, and you put passionate people on the project that you treat well, that you pay fairly, that you give proper benefits to, that you make sure they have time off and time to spend with their family and time for mental health. You do all those things, and then you package it into a single player adventure where you give them a full game. You don't hold it back behind seasons passes or battle passes or DLC or microtransactions. You just give the game as it is, as it's intended to be, for the appropriate price. And that's usually full price, and that's fine, as long as you're giving us a full game. I already had the game, I had it in early access, and I knew that that meant I was gonna automatically get upgraded to the digital deluxe edition, and I went ahead and bought the collector's edition anyway. Even though I didn't need the game, I was like, you know what? I'm okay with supporting Larian with this. I'm okay with spending the extra money to show Larian that, hey, I really support what you're doing here. I really believe in what you're doing here. So I'm gonna get an extra copy of your game that I don't need, and then I'm gonna give it to someone else. And I did. I gave it to a member of my community who wanted to play it, because I think it's just that important to tell all these AAA gaming companies, this is what you should be paying attention to. I'm not asking you to make another Baldur's Gate 3. I'm not asking you to take on that magnitude of a project, but I am asking you to aspire to be better, to aspire to treat your people better, to aspire to treat your consumers better, to aspire to make full games before you release them, to aspire to not put things behind paywalls. That's what we need to get out there, and that is one of the crucial reasons that Larian and Baldur's Gate 3 cannot be praised enough. I don't know what the heck you're doing here. Why are you listening to me? Go play the game. What are you doing? Thanks for watching.